This is the main stage of the festival and the center of the site. It's a 60,000 plus capacity stage where our main headliners, most of our main headliners, perform at the 10 o'clock slot at night. It usually does 3 to 4 shows a day. It's a quite long site. The system is set up to cover around plus 180 meters. The tent itself, the orange canopy, which is also a logo, was originally used by the Rolling Stones, or version 1. We bought it back in 1978, I think, for £5,000. And this one, which you see in the picture now, is our version 3, which we've had since 2001. The first year we deployed the Leo system in 2018 at Orange Stage, we had Eminem performing. And that's the biggest turnout ever at a single show at Roskilde Festival. There was plus 100,000. We added IMAX screens further onto the site for the audience to be able to see. And I had a walk around the site during Eminem's show, and at 250 meters, I could perfectly hear the show from the Orange Stage and see it on one of the IMAX placed at around 180 meters. So the coverage of the system is massive, but still contained to the orange side, which is amazing.
Yeah, and it's an amazing stage, and it's an amazing place there. It's also not only very deep, it's also very wide, and that requires a very sophisticated, not sophisticated, but a very spot-on sound design or system design. And since we are in a fortunate situation to have our friend and colleague Bob in the call, Bob, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the design of the Orange Stage?
I'm happy to tell you about Orange Stage. We're all very proud of all of the stages at Roskilde, but the Orange Stage is the big crown jewel on top of it all. The basic system is it's a left-right system in terms of there's a PA to the left and a PA to the right, but the coverage is so wide, you just don't even think about it as a stereo system. It's kind of a ridiculous thought you'd have for all the 100,000+ people that Lars mentioned for Eminem. People that would hear left and right would be about 1,000 of those. So really, you think about it, and we think about it and design it as a maximum coverage spread out over this very deep, but also extremely wide shape. It's and so it takes 4 big main systems to spread the sound out for the first 90 meters, and then there are 5 delay towers to spread it out for the next 90 meters. And that's the basic story. The delay towers are at 75 meters, is where they're located 75 meters from the mains, but they basically land and take over coverage at the 90 meter, at a 90 meter distance. There you can see in this slide the 5 towers. We were able to get locations that were like, and that's a nice thing because we dig the holes where they are. 2 of them are set behind the front of house sound and front of house lights, and that's right there. That is at Beer Central, which is a great place to have a delay tower because you don't mind that people are under the coverage for that point because you really don't want to cover them anyway. You want them to be able to order their beer. But the delays then, okay, here we go. Oh yeah, the center fill, that's an interesting one because you can see the width of the stage is such that those are 23 meters from center to each of the inner left and right array. So there's 46 meters between those two main left and right. And so that center fill Leopard system has a huge amount of work to do. And it covers the central area, which is some of the most sought after seating. These are the people that that get up early in the morning to get their ticket to be in line to this area. So you want to make sure it's covered, and we're really proud of the heavy lifting that the Leopard system does in this particular location. So you can see that the right PA basically fires right into front of house, and that's what the people are mixing off of. And so it goes. The frontal area is, of course, covered by Leopard front fills. They're basically across the stage as evenly as you can, dodging pieces of lighting gear and stuffed in whatever location we need to. But you can see we've spread all the way across, and that's what's needed because people get all the way up to that the crowd barrier. So their spacing is set by the uncoupled array calculation formula, the lateral aspect ratio, and so that by the time it reaches the barrier, the coverage gap is closed, and you're in one or the next or the next or the next. Those are the, now we're talking about the main subwoofer arrays, and these are a pretty specialized set of end fire arrays. They are both end fire arrays in that you can see that there's one behind the other, but they are also individually each element, which is a set of 9 speakers tall, and that's a gradient array. So it's a direct.
We will show a picture a little later in more detail. That's just to give an overview about the placing of the system. And
that's where they're placed. They're placed just inside of the mains. Okay. This is 3 of the delay towers. Or no, actually, oh, you can see all 5 of the delay towers, and 4 of them are the Lion with the 1100s. It's a full range delay system with directional subwoofers, so that they're able to extend the coverage and extend it as a full range experience. People don't want, the last thing you want is to have people in the distance here up close and really personal delay tower with distant, a far away low end. The low end has to be coupled and have the same kind of freshness of direct reverberant ratio as the rest of the range. So that's why we couple those together. And basically they would all be Lions, except for the one that you see triple R is a Leopard array, for the simple reason of it has a shorter coverage. All of the systems go from basically go from here to beer. They basically end their coverage when you hit the beer stands, and the delay triple R, they're the Leopards, has the shortest range to beer, so it's a scaled down speaker.
Yeah, and as Bob mentioned, there is at every delay position we also have the subwoofers to give that directivity. It's a little better to spot in the section view, where you can see the main system. Here, this is the place with the front of house on the 55, 60 meter mark. As Bob mentioned, and 75 meters, the actual delay systems are positioned, but they take over around at 90 meters. And the beer road or the beer booths are starting at around 180 meters. But let's first look into the main systems, Bob.
Okay. so looking at the main system, it's the Leo M loudspeaker system. It's our most powerful system. It's what you're going to use for these kind of applications. We also use it as the main system for Metallica and all kind of festivals around the world. We are 16 tall, and then we've got finish it with some Lion W's at the bottom to provide essentially a widening out to head towards the center and take some or work off of the center fill and the front fills. So those things are optimized both in their horizontal to meet and extend the horizontal range, and in the vertical, they're optimized to make a really seamless transition into the delay tower that's positioned there at the 75-meter mark. You'll also notice the front of house there, which is at the 55-meter mark. And I carefully designed the system to make sure that the meat of the array is very much, the beam of that thing is very much on the front of house location. So there's no feeling of the system either falling into the ground ahead of front of house or flying over the head of front of house and the mixer wondering where the mix is going. The mix is right there, but it creates part of a very uniform front to back response.
And you mentioned the Leopard system in the center that had a really hard job to do. I think it's becoming a little bit more visible looking at this one here.
Yes, and you might think of a traditional center fill as something that's would have been aimed hard down and be all done in 20 or maybe 30 meters at the most. And you can see that I've got speakers aimed out even as far as the depth of front of house. So these guys are working hard. They really need to cover a full 40 meters. So that's why you see them aimed with a little bit of overshoot to make sure that they're solid up to 40 meters. I'm always super impressed because that's one of the areas I walk, because there's some of the security walkways bring you right into the face of this system. And I'm always knocked out at how seamless and intelligible, and yet it doesn't stand out. You just kind of, you don't notice it, and then until you realize, oh my God, that's what I'm listening to, is those little tiny leopards. So
yeah, I had the very same experience walking this road, but I think everybody's also keen now to hear about that fancy things that have been flown beside the main arrays here. And
but before we go forward, Lars wanted to mention something as well, I think.
Oh yeah, it's just a traditional setup for a main stage. You would have a walkway all the way down to the front of the house. You don't at Roskilde Festival. It's the first pit is all across the width of the stage. So that's what it needs to cover as well, that you don't have a walkway split down the middle. You've actually a crowd standing there.
I think it's a little more visible here right now to see this. So there is no straight way there, so people can really also stand there and enjoy and being there.
And a thing to mention about the design on this is it's an interesting kind of upside down design, because the people that most need the help of the center fill are those people in the center that are right close up front. And the people that need them least are the people as you head out to 40 and 45 meters. And so if you look at the display angles, you'll notice that they're sort of widening up as you get to the top, which is upside down from a normal configuration. That's because I'm letting that thing go soft while the main systems come in to take over. In other words, we only need a little help at 40 meters. We need all the help we can get at 20 meters, and that's why you see the focus is upside down and inverted.
Yeah. So, but now let's talk about this fancy thing, Bob. And
okay.
I tried to put the words in there like you told us when we discussed the designs a couple of months before the festival last year started. So yeah. What what's that about the upward staggered, downward steered, gradient, inverted, flown, end fire array?
Well, that is the creative solution to what do you do if you've got 27 subwoofers and you're going to have to figure out a way to get it to steer really, really strong into the house, but make it so that it's very, very quiet at the monitor position that's located pretty much under them. And it's going to be quiet also in the backstage production office, which is directly behind them. And so what this array does, go ahead.
So yeah, I think if we look at this, then the next one, that was also my thinking is if you just mirrored something from the year before, and when I got the first designs from you, I was a little irritated by the thing. So the left-hand side shows us 2018, which was a standard staggered end fire array, and on the right-hand side you see it's staggered, but the other way around, and it's tilted, so it's steered. And so what was the reason for the change of the design? I mean, when I was listening to the system in 2018, I was blown away.
We were super happy at front of house with what we had in 2018. There was no issue there. It steered it. One of the things we wanted was to have sound. We wanted to have flown subs, but we wanted to have them reach the ground quickly, so that they so that we had a feeling of a grounded sub without the super loud in front that you get with the grounded sub. And so we were happy with that. You can see on the upper picture is the 2018 performance. And it was all happy and good at 63 hertz. But if you show the next picture, you can see, show me the next slide. If you look now at 30 hertz, you can see it coming straight down at 30 hertz in the 2018 slide. And that was right onto the monitor mix position. And it made for a really big issue for the monitor engineers. They were basically, one of the people said, a monitor engineer for Savia said that the subwoofer is making it hard for me to breathe. And that really struck with me. It's like, we really need to solve this. And so I wanted to be able to keep the impact. And what we realized was that the upward stagger made it so that the cancellation lobe went into the right direction, but with a downward angle, then we got the forward beam to steer in the correct direction. And so you were able to get the best of both worlds. And you can see there in this picture of 2018 and 2019 that we were able to totally maintain what we wanted in the front of house, and 17 dB improvement on stage. I went to measure it. I had already turned them on, and I was out there, and I had my calibration at front of house, and I took a microphone on stage, and Cece, who runs the stage monitors for the whole, she's the RF tech for the whole festival, she turned to me and said, "Oh, this is exciting. I can't wait till you turn on the subwoofers and we find out, you know, how that's working." And I said to her, "Well, they're already on."
I remember that one, and she was pretty surprised.
Yes. And it was when I told her, "Well, here's our numbers now, it's 17 dB down." And it was so quiet on stage that some of the artists felt that they needed more low end. And famously, Wu-Tang was so hungry for low end that they actually ended up sucking the circuit breaker dry on the side fill subwoofers. So we kept having to reset those breakers for them.
Must have blown their mind.
Lars also wanted to add something.
Because what happened from 2018 to 2019 was that behind the stage left, it wasn't just the production office moving in, it was the festival management moving in. And they moved into old wooden fixed buildings that would easily shake But they were able to, in 2019, to sit and work during shows just behind the stage, in stage left, because of this design, which was amazing.
Yeah, and having phone calls.
Yeah, they could do ordinary office work and do meetings during shows at the main stage.
And what is the actual distance as the crow flies from stage left towards these wooden buildings? Like 20 meters?
10 meters.
Yeah. So that's an amazing improvement.
Yeah.
Two more small things. Number one is we were very hesitant to do this because we had loved the front of house. So we really wanted to find a solution that solved the stage but didn't compromise front of the house. And in the end, going gradient, of course, on the sets of 9, we knew that was going to cost us some SPL on the front direction. But as it turned out, the coupling was so efficient on that thing, and the steering was it was better steered. If you look carefully at this, you can see a slight upward steering on the front beam on 2018, which is surprising with the downward stagger of the elements, but you see a downward steer on the 2019, which is surprising with the upward stagger of the elements. So it turns out we actually turned the subwoofers down 2 dB in 2019 to achieve the same relationship with the main system, with the Leos, as we had in 2018. And then the final piece is we ended up having to add a subwoofer, which we got off of, I believe, the Raoul's Rising stage when it closed, because his shows end and our shows start. And we got some subwoofers, yeah, there they are, which we added and used as a front fill because the coverage was so directional in the front that at the barrier in front, there was no low end. It was like, holy crap, we we overdid it there. So we basically made a little front fill subwoofer array for that area. And that's an additional one because there's already center front fill array. There's no low end in the center either. This is quite directional horizontally as well as vertically. So then moving on to the delays, each of the delays is, I believe, 14 of the Lion, and an equal mix of M's and W's, and they make a very gradual landing. The W, the wide one, and that is set up to, as I said before, your position is 75 meters. You land at 90. So by the time that they land, the W's are wide enough to pretty well connect to the neighboring tower. That's the basic idea, is that you want to have everybody meet the mains, and that becomes then the custody line. They meet each other, and then they take it on from there. It's a very, very small range of detectable transition, and you're pretty quickly in the custody of those guys. Then the subwoofer arrays, they are really well behaved in that we don't have any issue of you getting a back lobe off the subs that you find yourself hearing low end pollution coming back. And the front of house, of course, is at 55 meters, so it's quite close to one of those towers, but you have no awareness of that tower at front of house, absolutely none. And we even proved it. I turned it off and on, not during a show, but during a sound check. But we turned it off and on, and you had no knowledge of it. So
yeah, that was very often also that during the shows that we had to check if the delay towers are really running and confirm that, because some people was afraid that they aren't on and they aren't working, just because you don't spot them unless you're in the coverage of the towers, which means 90 plus meters. You don't spot them at all. You don't realize that they are playing and that they're actually shouting at you. So that's my experience there. But I think you also did the same for the small tower, for the short one. So where the coverage and at beer ends very very quickly.
Yes. And you know, you don't want to overcover because it's when you hit beer, you're hitting a lot of plywood. So your basic idea is to make it, but not don't. Once you've reached 150 meters, you've pretty much have a situation where anybody that wants to get louder can move in. And so basic people can set their own level. So I'm okay with letting it start to roll off after 150 meters. But that's a key thing is that people can regulate their own coverage that way. One of the interesting little things that we learned is that during the daytime, generally speaking, we have much smaller crowds. Not always, but it might be a smaller crowd for like the opening, the first show of the day. And so we turn the delay towers down a couple dB in that case, because people are already are not in the rear areas of that coverage, and B, a bunch of open land like that gets a big nasty reflection, and it actually sounds louder for the same level when it's all bouncing off of the ground like you're seeing in this photo. Once you fill it up with people, they take that bounce away, and you need those couple of dB back. And if you don't forget to put the level back up to to full house level.
That's correct. But that's why there is also a team working in every stage, ensuring that human misbehaviors doesn't make a bad show, right?
Yes.
It's a team effort.
And so one of the other things technically about this system is that each of the towers, and that includes the main two left and right main towers and all of the 5 delay towers, each have their own Galaxy, and all their processing gear is all there, and their networking gear, and they are all connected by AVB. So the signal is distributed from the front of house and from the stage all through the AVB network.
That's absolutely right. And as Bob mentioned, the processors are literally living at the towers, and there are fiber optics running all over the field, which is also a very nice thing at Roskilde, that the infrastructure in regards to tubes and channels and stuff like this is available to put that there. But of course, there was a safety feature in regards to analog backup lines, that you don't have any issues with your audio distribution, because at Roskilde, if one delay tower breaks down or is quieter or makes funny noises, I think that's 10 to 20, 30,000 people at some of the shows having not a good sound. And so you better make sure that everything is fine. Thank you very much, Bob, for the design overview of the Orange stage.
I did have 1 minute more, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I just wanted to mention that the tuning process, the optimization, it was much simpler than you might expect. There's a huge number of speakers, a huge number of moving parts, but basically we were able to use the integration to bring the systems into phase compatibility. We use the low mid beam control to do the steering of the low mids for all of these things. And basically it was timing and level setting was 98% of the tuning. So there wasn't a whole bunch of filters. There was practically no filters really effectively on the system. They were really run in their just compatible mode, and that was great. So there you go.
Yeah, and I can second that, because that was actually the same on the stages that I have been involved in the calibration process. And as we said before, there is not only those 3 stages that we presented today, there are 5 more stages that 5 more bigger stages. There's some tiny little event spots like the Flocker and this kind of stuff. But real stages, is there an unreal stage? No, but bigger event spaces. And we also want to share some impressions of the other stages. So what you can see here is the so-called arena stage, and Bob entitled this tent when he saw it for the first time, the mother of all tents, because it's really huge. It's really huge. It's, I don't know, Lars, is that 15,000 people?
17,000 capacity inside, and then roughly the same outside of the tent.
So it's really, really large. It's bigger than most of the indoor arenas in Central Europe. As you can see, it's a fancy shaped tent, and but it touches down on the poles in there. So it's a challenging design, and but it's a great tent, and it sounded really nice, and it sounded extremely similar to all the other stages. You can see also a little bit more, get a better impression of the large tent itself. There is another tent that also, so Arena also deploys Lion systems, as well as the so-called Avalon stage, which is the second biggest tent on the festival side. You can see also here the front of house PA, comprising of Ultra X40s. And we really got the feedback, and we really also within the team, the RF team, and Brightex and the Meyer Sound crew, we also just wanted to assure that everything sounds seamless and that everything sounds pretty nice. And I think Rahul had one of the experiences, because one of the engineers that worked on the Rising stage for once, he played also on another stage. Can you tell us about that, Rahul?
Yeah, sure. This is just to emphasize on how similar all the different stages sounded, even though the design, the way they looked, the kind of boxes that we used were different. So there was an act that played on the Rising stage, and I later met the FOH engineer after he mixed another band on one of the other stages inside, and he came up to me just to ask me how do you guys do this, how do you translate the sound from a Leopard system into a Lion system so seamlessly. He realized this because he was using he has some reference tracks that he knows well, and he was just amazed, and he came up to me to ask how this happened, and he was very impressed with how similar these systems sounded, even though they looked different.
Yeah, that's something that I think most of the people working there and experiencing Roskilde have realized over the years, and also especially last year, where we also had every stage deployed the Ultra X40, which gave us a very great tool to sculpture at the front of house position for the sound check, for the front of house engineers, the sound of the main PA. And the stage that you see right now, it's the so-called Pavilion stage. It's the smallest tent at the festival grounds, if I'm right. This is around 2,000 plus people, but all the tents are open on the sides, so there's no side walls. So there can be a lot of people outside. So most of the tents also using delay systems that can be deployed in case it's getting really hard or it's getting really crowded and stuff. And I don't know, it must have been 10 years ago or something. I had this one situation where we literally got the message from the festival that there is no level limits anymore, because the Pavilion stage was crowded with 10,000 plus people. And that was actually also one of the acts that later played on a very big stage at the Roskilde Festival, I think 1 or 2 years later. So Lars already talked about the countdown stage, which is the other stage that plays prior to the main festival, which is a little bit more in the urban music style. I'm so glad I made it. Not to say EDM. You see, this is also a big place. It also uses a Leopard system, and also this audience area is not really closed, so there can be a lot of people right there. And then we also talked about this the barn, and Oscar and Magoo was working there in the barn and supporting the barn at the so-called Gloria stage. Sorry, I should not say barn, because in the festival days it doesn't look like a barn. It's really nicely made and stuff like this. It's a pretty low roof, and but I think it has the most diverse variety of music styles, right? Magoo or Oscar, do you want to comment that?
I think maybe want to say something, or yeah, for me it was the first last year was the first time I was involved in Roskilde, and the variety of the music that we can hear over there was amazing. I can say that there were some kind of music that I don't think I haven't here in my life. So it was a very good experience. It was a small venue. It was like a 20 to 25 meters venue, and we did it with the Lina system, and 700 LFC were there, and we spent a lot of time um, with great bands and great performance in there.
Yeah, it's a very special place, and it's kind of also an intimate place because it's, as you can see here, other than the monitor position, there is no fences in this barn, so people can literally lean on the stage and stuff like this, which also I think is a very nice experience for the artist. And that almost concludes our roundtable presentation webinar.
Right, roundtable.
But here we go with questions, if there are some.
Yeah, let's open up the Q&A. Because we managed to make it 1 hour and 45 minutes, which is amazing. There's so much to cover. So yeah, please use the chat if you have any questions, and then we'll try to answer those to the best of our abilities with the collective brain power, which is somewhat intimidating during this call. The collective brain power that we have at our disposal.
I did see two questions that came up while I was going, so I'll answer those first. The one question from Hide was, what about the choice of delay towers? Who makes that choice? Do we make it, or is it made by others? And I just wanted to say, of course, sound is number one, and everybody does everything that the sound department asks. Okay.
Which usually would sound very sarcastic, but in regards to the Roskilde Festival, that's the absolute truth.
That's where I'm going with this, because it sounds crazy, but really the level of cooperation that we get and the level of real teamwork that we get working with Lars and his staff is amazing. So literally those delay positions are cut into the dirt to the locations that we ask for. Now, of course, those are shared. Some of those are shared towers with spotlights, and there's locations such as beer behind the two that are behind the front of the house. But overall, those delay towers are put exactly where we ask them to be. So it's tremendous levels of cooperation. We've even had cooperation to the point of moving bad pieces of plywood that were reflecting, giving reflection trouble at countdown stage, or these kind of things. So everybody really wants to make this a quality experience. It's quite amazing. The second question was the LMBC put on both the mains and the delays? And the answer is yes, LMBC for both mains and billets at the Orange Stage.
And then I saw a third question in there, which is, what was the primary job description of the delay towers? Were they primarily delay towers, or were they also acting as relay towers?
Oh, I would say that they are definitely relay towers.
Right.
There's only a very small percentage of their coverage that they are sharing, and they take over pretty quickly. By 95 meters, you have no knowledge that the mains even exist.
So then there is a question addressed to me, which is, did the shipping containers at the Apollo stage present any issues for the design? Well, there's two aspects to those shipping containers. I will let Lars answer one part of it. I will answer my experience with it, which is that the walls of these shipping containers are corrugated. So they act more like a diffuser and less than a specular surface, which work to our advantage. And they help in confining that sound energy within that area, being mindful of our immediate neighbors. So I didn't experience that as an issue, because they're anywhere from 2 to 3 layers tall. The walls are corrugated. Some of them were covered with fabric. So I did not experience that as a negative property. But they also serve other purposes, and I would like Lars to maybe elaborate a little bit on the feeling that was intended for those containers.
Yeah, because the first draft we received from the designer, our audio production manager, and myself, we had a look at it, and we talked to the Meyer Sound team about the first draft of it, and we actually moved the containers to make the sound work and avoid reflections. So it was a process where we wanted to keep the feeling of being in a club, but still position the containers right to avoid reflections. And that's one of the things that we're gaining from this partnership and team effort we have when we do our designs. We're changing a lot of the ways that we do our designs now. When we do a new stage design, the audio production manager and I will get the sketches for the stage, then add the speakers, and then hand it over to Meyer Sound. They all look at it, and then we'll hand it over to the light designer, because the sound is just a challenging physique to deal with. It's even more challenging than light, and from there on, the process with the light designer carries on. So the speakers are almost in a fixed position, and we can talk about how to adapt and how to do changes to achieve the optimal design. But the light designer is actually given the package with the stage, with the sound fit in. That's how we're working now, and that's some of the things we as a promoter and as a festival have learned from working with Meyer Sound.
Yeah, and I can second that. The lighting designer at the Apollo stage is Patrick, who was in previous years also working at the Pavilion stage. That was my first experience that you can really work very close together, and especially for our audio community worldwide, there are lighting people that really like good sound as well, and they do what they can to enable that. And I don't know why, but the concentration of those audiophile lighting designers is very high at the Roskilde Festival.
Go for Lars.
I think what's important is that if we all, no matter where we come from, light or sound or production or security, whatever we do, if we talk about what is it that we want to give to the audience. So we start in the helicopter and look at the whole thing, so we all know what we're set out to do together. It's not just doing sound, not just doing light, it's something that we do together. And there are compromises and other solutions that we need to look in, but once we're on the same page, everything is so much easier, and that's basically how we work at the festival.
So
that's what we call in the Meyer Sound team and in the group of people that I met over the years in the Roskilde Festival. This is what we call the orange feeling. That everybody's working together, and I think Oscar and Magoo and Bob and Merline and Rahul can confirm that that once you're on site and once you see this seamless work from different departments, people from all over the world, volunteers, RF techs. Just to mention that, one of the RF techs at the rising, not at the rising stage, at the Apollo stage, was a guy from New Zealand, and he worked hand in hand with a guy from Iceland. So that's something that is very rare, but it's so nice. And this is, as I said, we call it the orange feeling.
So we have a question of Mac DeGee that I would like to answer. He wonders, are there any clues and issues with the coupling between the VLFCs and the 1100s? For those that pay attention to the slides that came by, the 1100 and the VLFC, they shake hands at 31 cycles. And at 31 cycles, you can afford 7 meters of physical displacement and still be coupled. So the close proximity that the 1100s and the VLFC has had to each other is the penultimate result of bringing them together. And then there's another question that I would like to take, which is
one more thing on that, Merlin. In practice, where you saw the 1100s and the VLFCs stacked next to each other, and essentially the front box was coplanar. There's 11 milliseconds added to the VLFCs, and that makes them in sync with the 1100s.
Right. Yeah, and then there was a question of Kandakar, who says, have you designed the load distribution? And so here's the thing. Meyer Sound has a strict policy which is called below the hook, which means that we only specify point loads and trim heights, but we don't do the job of the rigging. We don't deal in gravity, so to speak. So we cannot answer your question, which was posed at 7:55, because we only specify below the hook, and then it goes into the domain of qualified people.
Well, in terms of the load distribution, I'm totally with Merlin, but the height, I can answer to that. If you take a look at this very photograph that's on the screen right now, you can see that we could have moved those speakers up much, much higher. They've got another 10 meters they could go up, something crazy like that. So why do we hang them so low? The reason we hang them low is we want to keep everybody in the show, in the art form. So we want to have them look towards the stage, and the sound come from there and link up to the main system. So that height is enough to get my landing to happen at the 90-meter mark where I want it, and then to give me a nice low angle to steer the system to the 180-meter mark and make it to the end there. If we go higher, then the sound image goes up, and the system essentially starts to unlink itself from the mains.
It's what I like to call. It's what I like to call shower sound.
Yeah, we don't want that.
I see a question, how many MDMs were deployed? Well, top of my head, I think we had at least 4 at Apollo. And then I know that all the drive racks in Orange had MDMs.
Yeah, kind of. The drive racks at some of the bigger stages have their or Bright Group is deploying their own distribution system. And if you think about 16 Leos plus 2 Lions, then MDMs is pretty big for its thing. The Pavilion stage was completely using MDM 5000s. The Countdown stage deployed MDM 5000s. Cannot tell you the exact number of that one. I would say 20 plus. The very big ones, because also the power consumption of 16 Leos and 27 1100s each side is a little bit higher than the 32 amp inlet of the MDM 5000. So there was a lot of other bigger and larger distributions also used.
Interesting question. Sorry.
That this will be a very short answer, but for the Leos running the Orange stage, we didn't use an MDM 1000. We used Bright's MDM 5 million.
That's a good claim. Yeah, but that explains it pretty nice. There was a question about network switches for AVB. That was Luminex gigacores, some gigacore 10s, some gigacore 12s that have been used at the Orange stage, at the arena, at the Pavilion stage, and I don't know, Gloria probably. I don't know. Have you been using AVB at Gloria, Oscar? Or Magoo? Yes. So Magoo is
Yes,
saying that.
it's ABB from the front of house to the stage where there was the other galaxies.
Yeah, and that was then probably also Luminex switches, right?
Luminex.
Yeah. So then it was exclusively Luminexes.
Does somebody want to answer Caleb's question? I saw a lot of UPQs as front fills. Why not X40s? Well, I know that we wanted to use a lot more X40s, but they were, you know, brand new at the time.
Well, the festival started in the last week of June, and we started shipping the X40s at the first week of June. So it was pure and simple. Of course, we would wanted to have as much as possible X40s on site, but that was a logistical problem. And yes, the UPQ is a little bit more powerful, and on some of the places like Countdown, I think the outfill really had to work very hard, and the 3dB doesn't sound that much, but 3dB is a different planet. That's like Saturn and Mars, and the distance is, if you have to cover like 15-20 meters at this levels, UPQ is your proper choice instead of Ultra X40, and that's why we still have that UPQs and the X40s and stuff like this, because scalability and power scaling is very important. But of course, it's very. I want to emphasize that within the webinars that are already recorded, you will learn about power scaling, or there is a green book available on the market that I know of, where you can learn everything about that.
Okay, last question, because it's 8 o'clock and I really feel that we have to call it a day. Last question for Bob. Bob, did you use one delay time for front fills or individual times for each speaker at Orange Stage?
We're definitely not one delay time. And I can't recall exactly if it was individuals or if it was pairs. I think it was symmetric opposites. In other words, whatever was, if you started from the center, those two were on the same, and then the next one's out, and the next one's out as you go out. One of the things to take note is that the outermost units were timed to the left and right mains, and once you got towards the center of the stage, you timed them to the center fill. Okay, and so so there was as we moved along, I had to determine who's the boss, and so each time that I would move, I think I started from the outside and moved in, and I would look at what was the timing information from the main, and then the timing information from the center fill, and go and time it to whichever one was stronger, and eventually the center fill won for the innermost 4 or 6 or so speakers.
Excellent. Thank you very much for answering that question. So that brings us to the end of this webinar. I would very much like to thank my fellow roundtable panelists. Oscar Barrientos, all the way from Mexico, Lars Lillingren from Denmark, Bob from the US, Michael from Germany, Mauricio also from Mexico, Rahul all the way from Dubai, and myself from Germany. Next week we will have webinars on channel delivering and matrixing. Next week is the Cine Studio Week, where we're going to talk about cinema designs. We will have guest lectures that I'm very excited about. Fellow Meyer Sound instructor Mauricio is going to do the same presentation on Tuesday. And as always, a recording of today's webinar will be available very soon on our YouTube channel Thinking Sound. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you want to watch these recordings once more. And other than that, I'm very much thankful that everybody spent 2 hours with us reminiscing Roskilde 2019. Our guest star, Lars, much appreciated, and to my fellow Meyer Sound colleagues as well, much appreciated. And all that I have left to say is please stay safe and please stay healthy, and bless you and your loved ones. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.